You're listening to Dropping Pins, a story-based learning series from the OK as Hunter podcast, hosted by Derek Melkor, and aimed at helping you hone your whitetail hunting skills. You'll hear the aha moments when known and unknown proven whitetail killers started consistently putting mature bucks on the ground.
Hey there, everybody. Derek Melkor here from OK as Hunter. I am not in the normal podcast studio. Those of you who are used to the OK as Hunter podcast and know that we shoot in my buddy Eric's basement in Oconomowoc, obviously this is not it. And I'm rolling solo today. I wanted to start off by introducing a new segment of the podcast that I'm going to be hosting, which I'm really excited about it. This segment of the podcast is going to be called Dropping Pins. I don't have a logo yet. It is currently being worked on. Actually, a former student of mine is helping me out with some of the creative direction, and she's working on it right now. So I'm excited to see what she comes up with. But if you came from our OK as Hunter podcast or one of the other podcasts in the OK as Podcast Network, welcome to this new one. Should be good, should be exciting. If you are finding us on your own and are unaware of the other podcasts in the OK as Network, I highly suggest you check those out. There's definitely something there that's going to float your boat or give you a good listen, whether you're out west hunting the expansive territories of the West, all sorts of Western game, to turkey, to fishing, to adult onset hunting. We've got everything. Eric has done a phenomenal job bringing in people from all different walks of life and forming this OKS network. So I'm excited to be part of it as a co-host on the OKS Hunter podcast, and now as the host of this mini segment called Dropping Pins. Eric is he put the ball in my hands on this one. He had a cool idea. He's really big into the Stoic philosophy, Roman and Greek kind of ideology and thinking. And he was doing some reading or listening. I know he's big on the audiobooks about one of the philosophers. I couldn't tell you which one it was, but he was talking about the origin of advanced thinking, or when things started to make sense. A lot of times, doesn't matter what you do, but once you've gotten very good at something, whether it's your trade, a job, anything really, but once you've gotten good at something, it's very hard to relate to people who are just beginning, because all the things that kind of built you up and made you good at what you're doing, you no longer have to think about those things. They're just second nature. You just do them. As hunters, we're no different. Somebody who's been hunting for 30 plus years, there's things that are so trivial to them that they no longer think about them, but yet they're really important stepping stones and things that should be thought about by beginning hunters. So Eric's cool idea was to kind of start a segment of the podcast where we focused a little bit on those moments when things really started to click. So not necessarily the end result. We love, talking the tactics and bed hunting and hill country and thermals. We love all that. And there's tons of great knowledge out there. There's great podcasts out there. I highly recommend you go check those out. I have. I've consumed a lot of that because that's kind of my cup of tea. I really enjoy it. But there's not a lot of podcasts that are bridging the gap between these very high level hunters, these people who have been doing it for so long, they no longer have to think of all these smaller steps that they're just doing, and the people who are the OKS hunter that just want to get a little bit better or make that next step in their hunting journey. And that's what the OKS hunter is all about, is being okay with where you're at in your journey. And if you're willing and wanting to continue climbing that ladder and making yourself a more efficient, dare I say, more successful, because it's fun to be successful. It's not the end all be all, as you know, but it's great to have a buck in your hands every once in a while. Going 20 years without killing one is not necessarily the funnest way to enjoy your hunt. You can still have fun along the way, but it feels good to be successful. So with this Dropping Pins podcast, this segment, we are hoping to talk to some of the high-level guys, the guys who are really doing a great job at being efficient and killing mature deer, getting on mature deer, and talk to them not about what they're doing, but about the moments where things clicked. Where were you when all of a sudden you realized that this is the way that maybe you should be doing it, which is our way of bridging the gap between beginning hunters, intro hunters, hunters who aren't taking it super seriously, which is a great place to be. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to elevate your game, hopefully there's going to be some things on here, some people we talk to, some stories we discuss. They're going to hopefully kind of get implanted in the back of your brain. And the next time you're out in the deer woods scouting or hanging cameras or hunting, hopefully these things will help you in your own journey, and you'll have your own story, and hopefully that correlation will be there. So that's kind of the idea that Eric had. He's the genius behind it. He's the creative guy. He's great at that stuff. And he's just kind of put the ball in my hands and said, hey, I know you like talking to all these big buck killers, so you go make it happen. And I'm really excited to do that. We've got a bunch of people lined up already, and we're going to be hearing their kind of aha stories when getting after mature deer, big deer started to make sense. And I'm sure we're going to hear about errors, misjudgments, things that went wrong, along with those genius little things of, oh my gosh, when I did this, all of a sudden I noticed this. And that piece of it is really, really important. And I think that's the growth mindset really shows through in hunters. And me being a teacher, education growth mindset versus fixed mindset, you see it a lot. There's guys who really strive to get better and better and think of hunting as an opportunity and almost like a sport where you can improve your skills. And then there's people who have more of a fixed mindset, and that's absolutely fine too. That just want to do what they're doing and stick to what they know and have fun doing it that way. In no way are we saying that's wrong. We're just giving the place for a person who says, hey, I do want to get a little bit better. Hopefully this is an opportunity for you to pick up some tidbits and some little nuggets of information along the way. And we're hoping to do it kind of in story form. So we're not just talking tactics, but here's what happened and here was the result of that. So I want to get on and just introduce what we're trying to do here. I'm really excited for it. We're going to be hosting it here in the basement. I have my first two guests later tonight. So they're going to be my guinea pigs. My buddy Tim and Corey are coming on later. So I'm sure if you've seen our OKS Hunter show, you thought it was comical watching Eric fumble around with audio issues. He's got nothing on me. I don't know how any of this stuff works. He gave me this microphone last night. I ordered this off Amazon last night. We'll see how it's going to go. But I'm excited for the talk part of it and the learning part, because I'm all about learning and self-reflection. So I'm excited to introduce dropping pins to you guys. And I also thought that I would drop the first pin myself to kind of set the stage for what I'm looking for in this show and what you can expect in hopes of learning. So I want to share with you one of my stories that helped me gain a little bit of understanding, because I am by no means an expert. I don't kill giant deer every year. Definitely my goal, but I'm not doing it. There's guys who are much, much better. But one thing that really stuck with me from this experience on, I'll reveal in the story. Many of you know I grew up hunting when I was 12 years old with my dad in the Nicolet National Forest of northeastern Wisconsin. My parents have had a place up there. My dad has been hunting up there since he was 14. So there's a lot of ground up there that we know very well. We've always taken scouting and walking very seriously. So I always joked as a kid that my dad knew every square inch of the national forest up there, which was an exaggeration, but he knew a lot of it and still does. So we always took our scouting very seriously. I was always in the woods with my dad, watching, learning, picking up things from him. Very grateful for that. Thank you, Dad, for always taking me along. This particular story was not when I was just starting out. I think this story takes place when I was about 17 years old. I'd say that's about 2004, I believe. We had done some hunting in one particular area, a logging road that gets gated off, and then you have to walk by foot to access all of this acreage, and it's thousands of acres. There's tons of land there. But we'd done a little bit of hunting in this area, and my dad was doing some bow hunting at the end of October, early November. I don't remember the exact date, but I do remember that he called home that night. I was at home doing school. My dad worked um, 4-day swing shifts. So he'd work 4 12s, then he'd be off for 4. And every 4 days, you know where he was? He was up at the cabin doing some bow hunting. So he'd called home one night after his hunt, and he was really excited. He's not super excitable guy. You could tell in his voice that he had seen something, witnessed something that was really interesting. And what he had done is he wanted to scout a new area, a big section of swamp that we hadn't really hunted before or scouted. He took his bow with him, but I don't think he had any real idea that he was going to be hunting, more just walking around with the bow. He'll bring it just in case, because I don't think he had a stand with him. My dad's always hunted out of tree stands, not a big ground hunter. So I think he just brought it as a backup just in case something would happen. Pretty unlikely, but he brought it anyway. But he did have his bow. And what he had done is walk through some hardwood timber. These logging trails go through some hardwood timber for a long ways. And he got back to this large cedar swamp. Those of you that are not familiar with cedar swamps, if you're not in the northern part of the country, cedar swamp is all cedar pole timber, very monotonous. It's very flat lowland ground with sphagnum moss, which is a green, wet, spongy moss that grows all along the bottom of the swamp. It grows underneath the cedar trees. And the cedars, I'd say there's maybe 8 feet to 10 feet of pretty much wide open understory. It's just all cedar poles, very vertical. And it just goes on for however big the swamp is. And then above that 8 to 10 feet, you get all of the conifer branches of the cedar trees. So then it blocks out the sun. So it's very dark, very shady, very cool. So anytime it's probably 10 to 12 degrees warmer outside of a cedar swamp, but it does offer some thermal cover for deer in the wintertime. But it's just monotonous. The deer spend some time traveling through them, but it takes the right kind of conditions for them to live in the swamp. But my dad he dived into the swamp, had his bow, and he was going to scout an area on the back side of the swamp. So he walked this swamp edge along the edge of the hardwood, stayed down in the sphagnum moss, so he was real quiet. The stuff makes no noise. And he just kind of stalked his way up, scouting for trails going in and out of the swamp. And I think he made it about 500 yards, as the memory recalls. And then there's a little terrain feature, a really interesting terrain feature. So on the south side of the swamp, he was following along the edge of a little ridge, and that's where the woods started, and it dropped down to the swamp. And then all of a sudden, about 500 yards in, that ridge starts to get taller, and there's almost like a little flat bench that falls off the main ridge as it starts to get taller, and it comes into the edge of the swamp. So if the swamp was like an oval shape, this kind of indented into the swamp, creating not really a finger, but in theory, a little bit of a point that kind of went into the swamp. And as he rounded that, he saw a deer, dropped down to his knee, got an arrow ready. And what he watched for like the next 45 minutes was 4 different bucks in the national forest in the early 2000s, 4 different bucks that were posturing, sparring a little bit. 1 or 2 of them was making a rub, and they were just kind of pre-rut testing each other in this little back nook of the swamp. It was still a little bit of dark timber, but it was transitioning up into that flatter area of high ground. And my dad couldn't believe it. He said 2 of them were really big. He ended up hanging a trail camera there later that year and got a really big 11 pointer and a really big 10 pointer. And he said 2 of them were smaller, but there was 4 bucks together, which is something he had never seen up there before. So he called home. Oh my gosh, found the spot, 4 bucks there. 2 of them were huge. So we were interested. We were, oh my gosh, I was just, I couldn't pay attention in school the next 3 days till it was the weekend. I could get up there and go hunting with them. And we ended up hunting back there. We saw some deer, but it was really hard to get to. You're going over a mile, and then you're traversing through the swamp to carry stands back there. It was tough. 17, I was eager to do it. And what kind of happened is my dad hunted there a few times bow hunting, never ended up getting one. And then the 3rd week of November, Wisconsin's gun season rolls around. And we hunted a different area opening day. We didn't get anything. And then during the week, I think I had school Monday and Tuesday. And I dragged my buddy Ben. He's a big deer hunter. We were buddies at school. He wanted to come up to do some second weekend hunting. So we dragged him up to the cabin with us on Wednesday morning. And Wednesday afternoon, we were going back into that swamp. I think my dad came with me. He sent Ben and I deeper into the swamp, and then he went around on a different edge. I ended up putting my buddy Ben on an interior island that's maybe about 200 yards, 300 yards before that area where my dad spotted the bucks. So I sat him on a little island. He's watching down into the cedar pole timber. And then I ventured on toward that spot where my dad had seen all of those bucks. I stayed inside the swamp about 80 yards. And I just had a little tiny folding chair, literally get your butt like 8 inches up off the ground, which is necessary there. You can't sit on the ground. That sphagnum moss will soak right through. It's real wet. So I pop up this little tiny chair, lean my back against a cedar tree, and I'm watching that little corner where like that shelf comes down. And then there's actually a line of evergreen trees. They're just small evergreen trees, spruce trees that come into the swamp about 80 yards, creating that kind of point. And I was just sitting there, and it's probably an hour and a half before dark, Wednesday of gun season. So there's been a lot of pressure. And all of a sudden I heard something. I heard a stick break. But instead of like instinctively getting my gun up and getting ready, I kind of was just listening, which was a mistake. I was listening instead of getting ready. And all of a sudden a doe pops out from behind those spruce trees about 40 yards away. And she immediately pegs me. She pops out, boom, pegs me. I'm thinking, oh darn, oh darn. She whips her head behind her. And then I'm really thinking, oh darn, oh darn. Another doe comes out behind her. I'm like, okay, at least it's not a buck because my gun is still in my lap like an idiot, not ready. So they see me. They luckily do not turn around and go back where they came. They just kind of take off through the swamp. Their tails did not go up. She just knew something was off. She'd probably seen orange pumpkins sitting in the woods all week. So she was just like, I'm out of here. So she just ran off the way she was going already, took off, took the fawn with her. And I'm sitting there going, dang it. I should have been ready, kicking myself in the butt. About 10 minutes goes by, 15 minutes goes by, and I hear something from the same exact spot. And this time, I'm not waiting. I threw my gun up on the exact opening that doe popped out on, not knowing what was going to be there. And all of a sudden, through the spruce trees, I can see a buck. I see a rack. I can see 4 on one side. I'm excited. Yes, middle of the week of gun season. This looks like an 8-pointer. Absolutely. In Wisconsin, I'm shooting that thing. He pops out. He hits the brakes right where that doe was, where she spotted me. I don't remember her stomping, but she probably put down some alarm scent there before she took off. He stopped there. Perfect. Quartering 2. I put it right on his shoulder. Boom. I shot. He runs away. I get all excited. I go grab my buddy Ben. Of course, I play some stupid game on him. I tell him it's a doe. Shot a doe, man. You know, come over here, help me blood trail it. And we got on the blood trail, and I'm lagging in the back. I'm like, yeah, follow the blood. I already just let me know what you think she weighs. She was pretty good size. And he runs up, and, you know, it's a 2-year-old 8-pointer. And oh, you sucker, you got me. And he's punching me. And so we had a little fun there. Got this 8-pointer out of Dad's lucky spot. And that little bit from me posting up there to going to get that buck, I noticed a whole bunch of big rubs following that spruce point. And it really caught my interest. I'm a rub guy. We'll talk about rubs. Don't worry. But I'm a rub guy. I saw some huge cedar rubs, big as my thigh. And it really got me like, this is a really special spot. Something about this spot is special. I just knew it. My dad knew it. He saw those bucks. Here, I shot that buck there. Okay. So we get the buck out. And it was a month or 2 later, season was over, and I had a conversation with my dad. It wasn't a conversation. It was me bullying my dad. This is what I did. I bullied him, but it was one of the best decisions I've made in my hunting career to ruin my dad. I said, hey, here's what's going to happen, Dad. Next year, I'm putting a stand up on that little spruce point inside the swamp, and it's going to be my gun stand. And you are not allowed to go in there at all beforehand. What do you mean? I said, there's no scouting there. There's no trail cams there. Don't bow hunt there. Stay out of there. I said, for whatever reason, that spot is special. Those bucks like it. You saw 4 of them there. Every time we go in there and you go in and you look and you scout, and you just want to poke around and make sure it looks good. I said, every time we're doing that, we're pushing deer out of our good spots. So this is my sanctuary. Stay out of it. So I strong armed my dad out of the spot he found. Sorry, Dad, that was obviously rightfully your spot, but I took over it. And in the spring, I put a stand up. It was only 7 or 8 feet high, but I could see over the spruce trees. I could see out to the edge of that little shelf. And I would not let anyone go back there. I just told my dad, please don't go back there. Don't go back there. It's going to be good. Don't go back there. So I kind of created this little sanctuary for myself. And that was one of the biggest learning moments, was making that decision to not do anything. No cameras. I don't want to see what's there. I just recognized that the spot was somehow unique, somehow special. The deer were using it. The fact that that buck and the doe were there during the middle of our gun season in daylight really intrigued me, along with the rubs, because deer in Wisconsin get pressured so hard during gun season, especially in that area. There's a lot of gun pressure. For them to be moving in daylight really was like a light bulb. There's something about this that they feel safe. That's why I wanted no one to go back there. So I made this decision. And for the next 5 seasons of gun hunting, I shot 5 bucks out of that tree stand, never going in there. The following year, after that 8-pointer, I hunted their opening morning. And at 10:50 in the morning, I shot my first truly mature buck, 5.5-year-old 10-pointer. Middle of the day. The year after that, I shot this buck right here, an 11-pointer at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I shot 2 other 2.5-year-old bucks from that spot in the middle of the day. And that moment that this started to happen, I made that decision and it paid off, really showed me what mature bucks, and not only mature bucks, because some of them were 2.5-year-olds, but how deer react to our pressure, even when we think we're doing ourselves a favor by running cameras or going into, let me double check there's good sign in there before I go hunt. In the Northwoods especially, or in areas that don't have high human pressure, those deer don't have to tolerate any human scent because there's vast, endless woods. So anytime you're leaving scent there, you're potentially telling a buck, hey, don't use this area. Just go walk 80 yards that way, and you'll be in a spot that has no human scent. So as far as like an aha moment, I really, truly started to internalize how important that human pressure, what we do and how it affects deer, really clicked with me. That stand was my best stand I ever had, that I stole from my dad. It was my best stand I ever had. Shot a bunch of my nicest gun bucks there. And every year it paid off, just not going in there and leaving it be. It became a place of refuge. One other thing that really benefited that spot was it was on the inside back edge of the swamp. And when I say back edge, I'm talking from public access. Private access is different, but from public access, where you have to park to access this spot, I was on the far back edge where this little shelf, this point, came into the swamp. Most of the edge of the swamp was bordered by great big hardwood hills, which, as you can imagine, were all posted up. There was guys everywhere on the outside edge of that swamp, posted up, watching 80 to 100 yards of hardwoods, and then they're watching the edge of the swamp. That's pretty classic Ridge Runner Wisconsin gun style. Nothing wrong with it. I've sat spots like that before. But what made my spot, my dad's spot, so great was that it was on the interior of the swamp, on the side that people were not accessing. And the reason I shot all those deer in the middle of the day, pretty sure, was because people were kicking them, moving them. When people were getting up, they were tired, they were cold, they wanted to go back to their truck to get a bite to eat, go for a walk to warm up on the edge of the swamp. They're getting up between 10, coming back to their stand around 1 or 2. That's the time I am shooting deer inside the sanctuary, inside the swamp. So I'm thinking that literally when they're getting up to go for a walk or grab a bite to eat, they're putting some sort of pressure, whether that's their smell, their sound, their sight, and these deer are running to the sanctuary, the backside of the swamp where they smell people the least, that I've now left alone, made a good choice there, and now that's their safe spot, and that's where I'm shooting these bucks. That spot has since changed, but for those 5 years, it really, really paid off well for me. The second year, well, the first year I hunted their opening day, the big 10-pointer, my first big giant mature buck that I shot. And when I say giant, this is Northwoods. So that deer was like a 138 deer, 5.5-year-old. So not giant antlers, but giant buck for me. Um, what I realized is walking up that morning, there was a dusting of snow, maybe a half inch of snow max. And my stand was just inside that little tiny point of spruce trees. And when I walked in, I could see a great big rub right behind my stand. Got me so excited because I hadn't been there all fall. I did not go in there and mess it up. Saw the huge rub. It's still dark. I got my headlamp on. I climb up into my tree, turn my headlight off. I'm slowly and quietly getting my stuff arranged, and I'm still facing the tree. So I climbed up and I'm facing the tree. My butt's facing out the way I'm going to be looking. And I look behind the tree, and there is a giant bed in the snow. So it's fresh because it only snowed like a day before. There's a giant bed melted into the snow 8 yards from my stand in the middle of that little spruce point, right next to that big giant rub. 10:50 that morning, that buck was coming from the far edge, coming straight back toward that cedar point. Was that his bed? I don't know. But it's always in the back of my mind that that was his little safety domain, and he was coming back in after some gun hunting pressure. So that was one of my biggest light bulb moments as far as chasing mature deer, was just the impact of everything that we do. Taking the ball out of their court, you can't control what deer do, but you can control what you do and how much pressure you put on the deer you're hunting, how much scent you're leaving behind in your best spots, when and how you're accessing your best spots. And there's a million podcasts on that, but that story and how I kind of thought about it. And every year when I'm sitting there, and then sure as heck, between 10 and 2, another buck would come, another buck would come. It was the only thing that made sense to me. So I've kind of taken that, even though I don't hunt that spot anymore, I've taken that idea of when you find a good spot, you keep it, leave it the hell alone. Leave it alone. It's good for a reason. Every time you go in there and recheck it and check your camera, hang a camera, all you're doing is detracting from that overall effectiveness of that spot. You're telling the deer, hey, someone's here. Don't hang out here. And you don't want to do that. So I wanted to share that story, pretty in-depth story, but that is one that absolutely has stayed with me. I think it's helped everyone in my family that I hunt with also, because they thought I was a little crazy kicking him out there. That's pretty hardcore, but everybody saw for 5 years in a row how well it worked. So that's just one that I wanted to share. That was one of my aha moments as a hunter, especially going after larger, older deer that don't have to tolerate that. And it's different all over the country. There's some areas that those deer will use the same spot over and over, no matter how many times you bump them. But in areas that are pretty desolate of human activity, if there's not a lot of human pressure, when they smell humans in their areas, it seems to make just way bigger impacts. It seems to really affect them, and it's not hard for them to move and alter their patterns to stay away from people. So that's my intro story. Welcome to Dropping Pins. We can't wait to stack up some episodes for you guys. Hopefully, this story-based aha moments of people learning what it takes to get in front of large, mature whitetail bucks is going to be somehow helpful to you, if not just entertaining. So story-based is always a little more entertaining than just hearing tactic, set up here, set up there. So we're hoping that this is going to be something that is really beneficial to our audience. I appreciate you guys checking it out. Stay tuned. We should be getting episodes somehow infused into the Okayest Hunter podcast. We're not sure how it's going to look yet, but you guys should be able to access it at some point. I've got a number of people that you're going to want to hear from lined up that I'm really excited to talk about. So I just want to say thank you. And hopefully this is something that really helps you in the long run. So stay okay, but it's never bad to want to do a little bit better. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. We will see you on the next episode. Later.